Hi, guys. I've been working on a book, otherwise I would have been down here. You know, I get about one book out a decade. I will serve no book before it's time. I'm not one of these guys who does a book a year. I do like one every day. Well, this was the first major book since Purpose-Driven Life. So, you know, it's really good to see you. You're not. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. I believe that you judge the richness of your life, not by fame or fortune, but by your friends. You don't need fame. The fame is a pain in the rear. It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's worthless. It's more problem than it's worth than it's valuable. You can use it, but it's certainly not a goal. Fame and fortune are not important. What is important are your friends.
Yes.
I am your friend, you guys. You can say, Rick is my friend. And you're my friend. We've been through a lot together. Can you imagine all the stuff we've been through?
Yeah.
Holy guacamole. Yeah. And that's what really matters, is friendship. And the richness of your life is I have good friends. And you got good friends. It's all about relationships. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbors yourself. That's what it's all about. It's not about activities. It's not about achievements. It's not about accomplishments. It's not about acquisitions. It's about relationships. And Jesus summarized the whole Bible. He says, it's all about true relationships. God and others. That's it. If you get that, it really doesn't matter what I accomplish, what I achieve, what I acquire. What matters is relationships. Did I really learn how to love? You know, because of my walk with the Lord, I've always been a person who thinks the best days are ahead of us. I've always had that attitude. I have the gift of faith, and I've always felt like next year will be better than this year. That's the way I approach life. We just did our 8th stewardship campaign in 35 years. And I went into it kind of going, oh man, another one. I'm thinking, this is going to be the best one we've ever done. And it ended up being the best one we've ever done. Right. You know, you would have thought by now I'd tapped it all out. There are people who've given to Saddleback 7 times. Think about that. 7 3-year commitments. And it's like, we're going to re-up again for another above and beyond the tithe. And they did. And they did. And we set a record. So I've always believed that our best days are ahead of us. But I talk to a lot of pastors, and a lot of guys, I get the feeling that they have the sense, this fear, that maybe my best days are now behind me. Maybe the best days of my ministry are behind me. Maybe the best days of my church are behind me. Maybe the best days of our country is behind us. I mean, we see what's happening in our nation. And there's not a slow slide, a rapid slide into all kinds of decay. And so I really think that the greatest need today is a message of hope. I think people need hope more than they need purpose. I think we need hope in our ministries. We need fresh hope in our ministries. We need fresh hope in our churches. You know, the vast majority of churches in America are plateaued or declining. We certainly need hope in our nation. I think a lot of people have the feeling the best days of America are behind us. And it's going to move on to some other culture. That may be. We'll either have a revival, a spiritual awakening, a third national awakening, or America will go the way of Europe. And, you know, we are to pray for our nation. There's no doubt about that. But God didn't call me to save America. God called me to save Americans. Big difference.
That's good.
Okay? All Augustine wrote the book, The City of God and the City of Man, because he stood in Carthage at the fall of Rome. And he goes, where's the church going to be without Rome? That was the attitude he had. And he wrote that book, The City of God and the City of Man, because he was worried about what's going on here? Rome has always been Rome. It's been a 1,000-year empire, and now it's crumbling. And he goes, well, there's actually another city out there. Called the City of God. And our fortunes don't rely on politics, fortunately, or government, or empires. But we need hope. I started sensing this way back in 2009. And I started writing a book called The Hope You Need. And it's based on the Lord's Prayer. Because I think when you understand the Lord's Prayer, it's an incredible message of hope. I've preached through the Lord's Prayer 4 times in 35 years. I've done 4 different series on it. Each time I hit it at a different angle, and you just go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you can't hit bottom of this thing. The more you understand it, you go, holy guacamole, this thing just goes deeper than I ever understood. And in these, Jesus said profound things in simple ways. We do the opposite. We say simple thing in profound ways. You go, man, that guy wasn't deep. No, he was just muddy. And so I started on this book on the Lord's Prayer, and I worked on it from about January to September in 2009. And then I put it on hold. Kind of like I did with Purpose-Driven Life. It took me 7 years to write Purpose-Driven Life. I didn't just sit down and do it. I kind of have an internal sense of when a book isn't right, when it needs, I need to be matured more. And so I just took this book on hope, The Hope You Need, and I set it aside, not knowing what I was going to go through in the next 6 years. I learned a lot about hope. I've seen what hopelessness does. I had a son who took his life. I know what it looks like to see a guy without any hope and to think total despair. So God was maturing me, so this is going to be an important book. You know, we've talked about this many times about the 5 kinds of renewal. You know, personal, relational, missional, structural, cultural, those 5 renewals that when God wants to work to change a church, when he wants to get a church off plateau, when he wants to, revitalize, renew, revive, refresh, he always uses the same format. It always starts with personal renewal. Always starts in the heart. Starts in the heart of the leader. Doesn't get in the heart of the leader, it ain't going to happen. No renewal has started without starting in personal life. So you get personal renewal as starting to renew a plateaued or declining church. It starts in me. It's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. And I don't care what you call it. Some people call it the deeper life. Some people call it making Jesus Lord. Some people call it the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Some people call it a fresh wind. Some people call it rededicating your life to Christ. Some people call it, I don't care what you call it, just get it. It's basically you fall in love with Jesus again. Okay?
Yeah.
Really, you just fall in love with Jesus again.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you left your first love, you come back, and all of a sudden everything gets fresh.
Yeah.
Again, and it's relationship. It's not rules, regulations, rituals, routine. It's relationship. And nothing happens till the leader gets revived. The personal refreshment, the personal renewal. And then, once you get that, you move to relational renewal, from personal to relational. And that's when we realize we're a family. That's the koinonia. And that's when people not only have to get right with God, they now start getting right with each other. Every revival starts with confession and repentance. And it's not just confession to God, it's confession to each other. It's getting right with each other. And I remember many years ago, I was 17 years old, I was preaching in a little church out in Rialto. And it was a summer night, and there was no air conditioning. A little one-room church was about half the size of this. It was open. There were about 50 people sitting in there. And I was preaching on revival, and at the end, all of a sudden, I just felt impressed, Lord. I said, you may have something against somebody in this church. And in just a minute, instead of you coming forward when I give an invitation, I want you to go to that person. Don't come to me. I want you to just get up and go to that person and confess whatever you've had in relationship with each other. And so I said, I want you to do that now. And I got off my head and started praying. All of a sudden I heard this noise, and I looked up, and the whole church was going to each other. And this Christian was going over here to this guy, and this woman was going over here to this woman. There was like a line of deacons to see the pastor. And it was like, whoa. And that service went about 2.5 hours. And I remember a kid was walking along on the outside, and he walked by and I saw him standing in the pulpit and watching the outside. And he saw it, and he just wondered what was going on. So he walked in and gave his life to Christ that night. Evangelism is always the result of renewal. Because when God wants to bring a bunch of new babies into his kingdom, he looks for the warmest incubator he can find. He's not going to put them in a cold, dead church. He's going to look for an incubator where they can be warmed. So personal renewal and then relational renewal. We get right with God and then we get right with each other. Now, historically, in American Christianity, those two renewals happened through what was called the annual revival. And what you would do is you would bring in a guest speaker who he was saying the same thing the preacher was saying, with just different voice. Just different voice. No, not a better speaker, just different voice. And he comes in and he teaches, everybody gets right with God, everybody gets right with each other, and the church starts to grow. And as it begins to grow, then they go, okay, what's next? And the third renewal is missional renewal. Missional renewal. Missional renewal is what purpose-driven church is all about. Purpose-driven church is about, we have a mission. PD was missional long before anybody used the word missional. They say there is a mission, there is a commission. The Great Commandment, the Great Commission is the mission of the church. We're not here just to be a bless me group. We're not just here to be a social club. We're not here to hold hands and say kumbaya. We have a task. We have a kingdom assignment. We have something to do. So we go from personal renewal to relational renewal, and then when you get those two, then you can have missional renewal. The reason why PD doesn't work in some churches is they never had the first two renewals. Does that make sense? Yes. You go in and you start saying, hey, we're all about 5 purposes. Membership, maturity, ministry, mission, magnification. Or bring them in, build them up, teach them out, send them out. Or, evangelize, equip, edify, and all of the, how many different ways can we say this thing? Okay. I've probably come up with 20 different ways. The 5 callings of life. You're called to be loved. You're called to belong. You're called to become. You're called to bless others. That's ministry. And you're called to be sent. It's the same 5 purposes, just in another way. So I don't care whether you C's or B's or Q's. Okay? Doesn't matter to me. You just got to do the 5 verbs of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, right? Right. That's it. You get the Great Commandment, Great Commission. I don't care what you call it. Just get those 5 verbs, because that's what God commands us to do. So when you have personal, relational, and missional renewal, the church starts growing. You can't keep it from growing. If it's got those 3, it's on fire and it grows. But so many churches, they start growing, and then after a while they kind of hit a glass ceiling. And after a while, then they stop and they decline. And then they have another revival, retreat, conference, and they get the 3 renewals, and then they hit the ceiling and they decline. And I actually, when I was in seminary, did a paper on this and showed how some churches can be 150 years old, and they've never broken past certain barriers. They have periodic renewals and revivals, but they go back down. It's because they never get to the 4th renewal, which is structural. Structural renewal does not cause growth, but it can prevent it. Structure, you can reorganize your church 100 times and it won't grow. But you do have to reorganize your church every time it does grow. Because what worked when you had 50 people doesn't work when you have 500. What worked when you had 100 doesn't work when you have 200. The way you make decisions, and at every stage of the growth, you have to revise, renew. I've told you this before, that every 7 years you get a new bone structure. That's why you have bone marrow. Because your body's constantly sloughing off bone cells and creating new bones. If you didn't get a new structure every 7 years, then you'd look pretty funny. If you were still in the skeleton of a 2-year-old and the rest of you was growing. And it is structure that is keeping a lot of churches that have had 1, 2, and 3 renewal from growing on further. So purpose-driven church is all about how to organize for growth so you can have unlimited growth, exponential growth. Then when you get those 4, personal, relational, missional, I mentioned structural, then the church starts affecting the community it's in. And that's when you get cultural renewal. And all of a sudden the moral climate of your town starts changing because of your church. You have such influence. Saddleback is like a giant elephant in Orange County. When we move, it shakes the ground. Because it's such a big influence in so many areas, in schools, in hospitals, things like that. That didn't start that way, obviously. I mean, it took me 35 years. I can show you how to build a significant church. I can't tell you how to do it quickly. It does happen. And the size of the church really is only necessary in relationship to the size of your ministry area. I remember a PD guy who grew a church to about 400 people, but he was in a town of 1,000.
Yeah.
I said, man, you are doing a better job than anybody in America. I don't know another church that has 400 people in a town of 1,000. I mean, if I had that kind of ratio here, the church would, Saddleback would have 500,000 people in it. Because, so don't ever compare number to number, compare ratio to ratio. You're going to look at that and go, what's the ratio of my ministry area to whom we're reaching? And on top of that, because what we've learned about multi-site, things like that, I'd rather have 10 churches of 500 than one church of 5,000. Why? Because you're actually going to make a bigger impact. And you're going to have, I'm not into this bringing them on. That's why, have you realized Saddleback is still in the same building we built in 1982? I could have built the 8,000 seat auditorium years and years ago. I don't want one. We're trying to hide our size. We're trying to hide it through multiple services and through decentralization. We don't want people, because actually the truth is, nobody really likes big churches except pastors. Okay, nobody gets up and goes, let's go to the most crowded church today.
Yeah, right.
The one we have to park 20 minutes away from the place to get in. No. They put up with size to get the benefits. But nobody chooses a church because of size. They only put up with it. And so we're not trying to show that. We're trying to show a lot of other things. But we got to have, when you get those 4, then you get cultural renewal. And if we don't get cultural renewal, well, then, as I said, we're going to see America's continued decline. And we'll see just God's hand of blessing somewhere else. The one thing I do know about this is the church has outlasted every crumbling culture for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
We're on the winning side. That's a reason for hope. So my hope is not in the nation. My hope is not in the culture. My hope is not in politics. My hope is not in everything else that seems to be crumbling around. My hope is in the church, which is going to still be here 1,000 years from today if Jesus hadn't come back yet. I'm betting on the winner. What I've learned is that the more I honor the local church, the more God anoints my life. The more you honor the local church, the more God will bless, empower, and anoint your life. Christ died for the church. He says, I love it this much. I love it this much. So we have significance regardless of what's going on in culture. So I started 6 years later now, I started, and I'm going to spend all of July finishing this book of The Hope You Need. This is the follow-up to PD Life. And like PD, it's 6 years in the making. Okay, and in January we'll do what I intend to do over the next 5 years, Lord willing, is we'll do a campaign each year on one of the renewals. So we'll start in January 2016 with personal renewal. And that's this, personal renewal. And then we go to relational renewal. Then we go to missional renewal. So we'll have a tool for each of those. And so then you can, as you coach churches, go, you know what you need is you need this tool. Because really where you need to start is over here personal. No, we're really on fire. Great, fine, skip that one. You need to go to the next one. And so my goal is to create these tools that you can use as you coach churches, as you help others. Go, you know, buddy, what you really need is you need relational renewal because you got too much fighting in your church right now. And you can't row the boat when everybody's rocking it. Okay? You know, and so you got to deal with that. You got to deal with the gossip in your church. You got to deal with the crankiness in your church. And you may have to have a few blessed subtractions before you have some additions. Okay? Some people may have to leave your church. How many people had to die in the desert before God let them go to the promised land? All of them. Except Joshua and Caleb. Now that's church decline. Okay? But you must never let whiners set the agenda of your church.
Amen.
If you do, you'll never get anywhere. I've had people in our church who I personally led to Christ, walked them through a crisis. They went through divorce, husbands, wives walked out on them, did their remarriage, brought them, helped them grow up to maturity, and then they come to me and they start listening to some radio preacher and go, Rick, you need to start preaching like that. And if you don't, we're going to go to another church. Every bone in my body was, come back, come back, come back. But no, sometimes you just have to let people go. Because there's something more important than any individual person. It is the body of Christ. And we will not let the church be held hostage to some whiners or cranky people. It's interesting. You have crankers today? Of course we do. It's just they're diluted. The value of getting bigger is this. They don't have as much power. The smaller the church is, the more power the most negative person in the church has. That's just a law of life. The smaller a church is, the more the most negative person in the church has power. As the church grows, it gets diluted. And they don't have as much power. And so, really, the tough part of dealing with power brokers is in the smaller stages, because it's gut-wrenching to confront self-centeredness. That has to be done. So pray for me, because I'm going to finish this book, The Hope You Need. And the Lord's Prayer, there are 10 phrases in the Lord's Prayer, and it does three things. First, it gives us 10 pictures of the nature of God. Every phrase gives us a different picture of the nature of God. God is a provider, God is a protector, God is our Father, God, the 10 pictures of God. Every one of the 10 phrases is the antidote to a fundamental need of people. Forgiveness, guilt, resentment, as we forgive those. Worry, give us this day our daily bread. Loneliness, our Father. So it's 10 fundamental needs, 10 pictures of God. And then, I didn't realize it until just probably in the last couple of years, that the Lord's Prayer is actually 10 steps for renewal in your life and in your church. And if we do them, and actually if we do them in order, it will bring that first renewal, personal renewal. So that's what the book's going to be about. And I ask you to be praying for me on that. That we, it's just, like I said, I don't write just to write. I only write when God says, you need to write this. So there's enormous pressure on me after PDL to write something next. Publishers really wanted something next. I don't have anything to say. Yeah, I can give you a bunch of sermons, but so what? There's lots of good sermons out there. Okay, I got to have a life message and the life message that America and that our churches and that our pastors need right now is a message of hope. It's a message of hope. They need a fresh hope. And so I'm praying that this campaign, which tentatively right now we're going to call it 50 Days of Hope, will have the same impact as 40 Days of Purpose did 12 years ago. Now, 35,000 American churches eventually did 40 Days of Purpose. 10% of American churches, 1 out of every 10 churches did 40 Days of Purpose. And I still get letters from people on this. I'm not exaggerating. I may have gotten 500,000 letters from people who said 40 Days of Purpose changed my life. I believe this is the right time. Let me tell you a few things that are going to happen this fall here at Saddleback. I'd love to have you come back for any of these 3. In October, November, and December, we're going to do 3 brand new conferences that we've never done before. Never, ever in history. Now, most of you know that for about 20 years, I taught PDC and had you teaching it, purpose-driven. And we taught it all around the world. We had about 400,000 pastors go through PDC. And then 10 years ago when we launched the Peace Plan, I said, I've got to spend 10 years focusing on getting this thing launched. So I stopped teaching Purpose-Driven Church. And for 10 years, I didn't personally teach it at all because I was busy often overseas in little villages you've never heard of, launching the Peace Plan. And we set this goal to go to every nation, 197 nations. And over the last decade, I sent out 24,865 of my members to 197 nations. And so you know what that means? When I get up on Sunday, I'm preaching to a church full of missionaries.
Yeah. Wow. Yes.
You know how that changes the culture of your church? Yeah. Awesome. You send somebody to Burundi, and they come back, they're not thinking about what's my next tennis bracelet. It just totally changes your outlook about money and materialism and stuff like that. And so I'm in a fun stage at Saddleback because I'm teaching missionaries. I'm teaching people who have gone overseas. And again, it took me a long time to do that. It didn't happen overnight. But my goal is to now train them in renewal teams that we can send out to other churches. When I was a youth pastor back in the 70s at the First Baptist Church of Norwalk, downtown LA, and we had a little church of about, 300-400 people. Well, that's not little, but it was a pretty sleepy church. It wasn't doing anything. It had been that size for a long time. And there was a thing that came out in the 70s called lay renewal. And a lot of denominations had this. Methodists had it, Baptists had it, Church of Christ had it. Lay renewal was you would send teams of lay people to a church for a weekend to help spark a new sense of renewal. And I remember our church had a lay renewal team from the First Southern Baptist Church of Bakersfield come down. It was like about 21 people, right? Mostly couples, a few singles. And it was a real pretty simple format. They had a Friday night service, and all it was is these lay people told their stories, told their testimonies about what Jesus meant to them, the power of a quiet time, and the power of prayer, and they just told their stories. Singing and testimonies. That was Friday night. Saturday morning, the lay people went into homes. They had these coffees, and they met with people, and they shared more testimonies. There was no preaching the entire weekend. Saturday night, they came back. We had a service on Saturday night, and these 18 or 21 people from Bakersfield shared their stories again. It was just guys talking about how Jesus was real to them. More worship, more respect. Sunday morning, no preaching. Again, the team just tells stories and sharing what it means to me as a layman to have Christ in my life. And then Sunday afternoon, they went back to Bakersfield, and Sunday night, our church, the local church, has a session where our own people give testimonies of what happened on the weekend. That thing ignited our church, and it began to grow. And within 2 years, we had doubled. Simply by bringing in people from the outside, normal people, not a preacher, come in and share their stories. Okay? They later, Southern Baptist later came up with the second weekend. That was called Lay Renewal Weekend 1. Lay Renewal Weekend 2 was on every member as a minister. It was the idea of coming in and lay people sharing about what it means to have a lay ministry. And gives people an idea of, oh, you mean I'm supposed to have a ministry? And it was a great, great renewal. Well, that was in the 70s. Since that time, I've always had this dream of, what if we had purpose-driven renewal teams that come in and talk about the power of class, and talk about every member minister, and talk about the power of small groups, and talk about campaigns, and talk about all the things that have made a difference in their lives. And I got a church full of people like that who could go out and do that. And so my goal is to, in addition to the 50 Days of Hope campaign, create these renewal hope teams that can go out into a church and then offer training for lay people in other churches that they can go out. You know, the quickest way for somebody to get on fire is for them to teach what they've learned. You know that. And so you get your people teaching PD, and you get your people giving testimonies about this is what having quiet time and tithing and being a small group meant to me, which are the 3 commitments of 201. This is what it meant to me. You go, wow, that's far more effective than me coming in and preach a sermon on it. So we're going to do that. 3, let me give you some dates to write down. As I said, the reason I haven't been here is I've been working on this book. So I was up to 2 today, I was up to 3 last night, and the night before. I'm literally putting in about 12, 14, 16 hours a day on this book. October, the 3 brand new conferences, October 7 to 9, Saddleback's going to do the first national summit on mental health in the church. That's a direct response of my son's suicide. And, you know, I did not ask for this ministry, but God gave it. I'm not going to waste a hurt. Since Matthew died, and since we were so open and obvious about his mental illness and his lifelong battle with depression, I get calls every week from famous people who have kids who are struggling with suicide. Well, I mean, I'm talking about congressmen and senators and seminary presidents and well-known pastors and things like that. And I don't like that ministry because it still is painful for me, but it's helpful. So we're going to do the first national summit on the mental health in the church. I think it'll have the same impact that 10 years ago we did when we did the first summit on AIDS in the church. Kind of raised it up and said, it's okay to talk about this. You know, I don't know why there's so much stigma related to mental illness. I used to think AIDS was the biggest stigma. It's not. It's mental illness. I mean, if my heart doesn't work and I take a pill, there's no shame in that. If my liver doesn't work and I take a pill, there's no shame in that. If my spleen doesn't work and I take a pill, why if my brain doesn't work and I take a pill, I'm supposed to keep it a secret?
Really good.
It's just another organ. Your chemistry is not your character, and your illness is not your identity. Matthew was a brilliant kid, tender heart, loved God, led people to Christ, but struggled with mental illness and depression his entire life. I told you this one time. When Matthew died, we probably got 35,000 letters of condolences. And the letters that came in that meant the most to me were not from kings and queens and presidents and rock stars, but they were letters that were from people that Matthew had led to Christ. And they said, I'm going to be in heaven because of your son. And I remember writing in my journal, in God's garden of grace, Only even broken trees bear fruit. The truth is, we're all broken. We're all mentally ill. Everybody struggles with obsessions and worries and dark thoughts and fears. Everybody has those. Am I going crazy? Am I going to take my life? Am I going to make everybody? And so, why don't we just get this out of the way? So that's going to be a huge conference. We've got the top people in the nation coming to this. The head of the National Institute of Mental Health is coming. The Surgeon General is coming. The head of the North American Mental Illness is coming. I've got well-known pastors. I've got Professor Cornel West is coming. All kinds of people who are, it's going to be it's kind of a big deal. So that's October 7 and 9. November 10 to 13, which is a Tuesday to 13, I'm revising and re-energizing a brand new, totally new Purpose-Driven Church Conference. Woo! Okay? And November 10 to 13. And what I'm going to do, this November is the 20th anniversary of the book, Purpose-Driven Church.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a conference on everything I learned since the book. All the mistakes I made, all the stuff I learned the hard way, all the stuff we surprised us and worked better than we thought. So it's kind of like everything since PD came out. Okay. We'll still do basic. I mean, the thing I know about PD is it still works. Move them, bring them in, build them up, teach them out, send them out. It still works. And it works better than ever before because we keep tweaking it. But that'll be a conference, and specifically, one of the goals of Saddleback, I always like to program the exact opposite of what everybody else is doing. So for instance, in the 80s and in the 90s, nobody was talking about church planting. So we were doing church planting seminars in the 80s and 90s. Now, everybody's doing church planting seminars. In fact, there's a lot of guys going into church planting who should not go into church planting. They think they're going to have less problems. And as you know, I've said this many times, existing church, new church, they both have problems, just which set you want to live with. They're different problems, just which set you want to live with. And there's no problem free church. If there is, I'd be there. We're going to do this conference, and now that they're doing all these conferences on church planting, I said, Saddleback's going to forget church planting, because everybody else is doing a conference on it. We're going to go back and help all those great churches that are good churches that are plateaued and stuck. And so the rest of my ministry is going to be on renewal. How do we renew? These are good people in good churches. They're just stuck. Okay? They're not bad people. They're good people. They love the Lord. They're just stuck. And so I couldn't teach a conference on that 6-8 years ago because we had never been plateaued. And so I only teach what I can teach from experience. I couldn't teach how to break the church out of plateau because Saddleback had never been plateaued. It had always kept growing. But in about 2006, from 2006 to 2012, Saddleback plateaued. Now, I know all the reasons it did, and I know how to reverse it, and we did it. And in 13 and 14 and 15, we've had our 3 biggest years of growth. But I didn't know how to do it. I'm not going into all those causes right now, but one of the things that caused the church plateau was purpose-driven life. Purpose-driven life was great for the world and terrible for our church. Because it made me a celebrity. And all of a sudden, I'm being asked to speak at Congress, and Davos World Economic Forum, and the United Nations, and Aspen, and TED, and there's a word for that, it's called distraction. And it took me away from my church. It was great for the world. It was bad for the church. It made me a statesman, the go-to guy that media people want to ask about Christianity. Okay, I'll take that role. But it was hard on my church. Really hard on my church. That was one of 4 or 5 things. We also ran out of space and a lot of other things that happened. Anyway, in 2012, I said, okay, we're going to make these changes. We made those changes. The church began to grow again. In fact, in 2013, which was the worst year of my life, that was the year Matthew took his life. When Matthew died, I took 4 months off in grief sabbatical. I didn't preach, I didn't teach, I didn't go into the office. I was basically gone for 1/3 of the year. So 2013 is the worst year of my life. I was gone for, I didn't see the staff. I spent pretty much 12 hours a day alone with God for 4 months. About the only person I saw was Kay. Which, by the way, you can't spend 12 hours a day with God and then not change you. I'm just not the same guy that I was before Matthew's death. Time to go? Okay. Yeah. All right. I just spent time alone with God for 4 months, and it was a changing thing for me. But I was gone 1/3 of the year, and it was our greatest year of growth. Because of the changes for getting a church off a plateau, the things that I told our church to do in 2012, in 2013, we added average attendance 4,200 people in weekly attendance in 1 year. We've never had that kind of growth in 35 years. Never, never. So the greatest year of numerical growth at Saddleback was the worst year of my life, and I wasn't even here. This is the difference between purpose-driven and personality-driven. How do you know when you have a personality-driven church? The pastor's tired all the time, and when he leaves, everything falls apart. I leave for 1/3 of the year, and the church has its greatest year. Why? Because we had systems in place that we're going to go whether I was there or not. So I know how to help a church get off the plateau now. Because and so I'm going to share all of those things. That's that 3rd conference, December 2 to 4, finishing the task conference. So by the way, the purpose, PD, we're going to call it PD 2015. PDC 2015, just the initials, but the subtitle will be something along breaking through barriers and plateaus. It's going to all be about personal renewal, church renewal. Okay, church renewal. Then December 2 to 4 is finishing the task conference, which is a peace conference on going after those final 3,000 tribes. And then in January, we're going to do, the end of January, we'll do 50 Days of Hope. And I hope you guys want to do 50 Days of Hope. It's going to be a great campaign.
Yeah.
And it'll be all on that. In August, I'm taking some people to Rwanda, where we're bringing in pastors for the preparation for All Africa, which is going to be in October 2016. If you want to go on that, I'd love to have you on that. Definitely need you to be there a year from now, at the big conference, the All Africa. If you want to go early and meet a bunch of those guys that we're training, we're planning in All Africa, we're going to be there August 6 to 10. 6 to 10. And then I really do have to go, I'm sorry. One other thing I'll tell you about that's it's close thing, but I want you to pray for it. Several months ago, some of my buddies who are high-profile African-American pastors called me and said, Rick, this was after Ferguson, can you organize a pastor's retreat on racial reconciliation? You're the only guy to do this. And so I said, sure. So at the end of August, you can pray, there's going to be a small group of high-level pastors here to deal with the issue. We got to stop this violence. Okay. And I mean, this broke my heart, this stuff at Emmanuel AME this last week. And so it's going to be a racial reconciliation conference. It's not even a conference. There's no agenda. But some guys like T.D. Jakes and other guys are coming in, Harry Jackson, and we're going to just sit down. Out of that, form a steering committee for hopefully something a whole lot bigger. So you got to be praying for that, okay?
Yeah,
It's a big deal. Something I care about deeply. You know, the A in Saddleback is all nation congregation. We believe that the church ought to look like heaven's going to look like.
Yes.
That's why we speak 67 languages at Saddleback now. When we started, Saddleback was a lily-white, suburban yuppie church. It looked like me. I was 25 years old and white. Today, we're an all-nation congregation. You get up at 11 o'clock, it looks like the UN. As I said, we speak 67 languages at Saddleback, and we think that's what God wants the church to look like. I wish I could stay, but I have a granddaughter's recital. I love you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Love you.
Thank
Write to me, Minneapolis, Minnesota, that's all the address you need. You live in Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba. Get my new book, Put Your Mouth to the Spout, when the gospel comes out. I love you guys. All right. Sorry I couldn't stay longer, but I just knew that I had to run down here and see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Love you guys.
Thank you. Love you.
See you, buddy. All right. You like this guy?